with the e-racing, everyone needs a different amount because they're putting different watts out. And I think that's what people haven't really focused on. They just hear, oh, so-and-so is having 120 grams an hour, I'm going to do that. And then there's no further thought around that, whereas you need to look at kind of, okay, what's your whole day like? What's your energy output for the stuff you're doing off the bike? And then when's your training? What time of day is your race? And I think now the level that e-racing is getting to, you have to think about all of those things to make sure that your nutrition's really helping you perform to your best.
Hello and welcome to the Virtual Velo Pod. We are here for episode 68, and when I say we, I mean me, Emma Martin, and my co-host, Chris Schwenker. Well, the Virtual Velo Podcast, the show that bridges the gap between athlete and avatar, keeping it real in the world of cycling esports. Today, we are joined by Kate MacLeod, a cyclist, coach, nutrition consultant, and influential voice in cycling esports. Kate's diverse athletic journey from rowing to gravel to virtual racing has shaped her unique perspective on training, nutrition and performance. We're going to dive into the nuances of fueling elite esports athletes like Zwift Games Sprint Championship contenders, explore why virtual racing demands specialised training methods, and unpack the complex issues surrounding weigh-ins, burnout and athlete wellness. Plus, Kate's sharing with us invaluable insights on building personal brands, securing sponsorships and thriving as a self-promoted esports athlete, Chris.
I'm really looking forward to speaking to Kate because, first of all, I know I'm getting this wrong. And the nutrition bit, I know that I am getting it wrong every time I get on the bike. And virtual cyclists, cycling esports athletes in general are. I came across a 2022 study published in the British Journal of Nutrition that asked over 100 cyclists about their nutrition habits, and 75% of them consumed no carbohydrates whatsoever during training or racing. So it certainly is an insidious topic that we can discuss. But I also, when I see professionals, performance professionals like Kate, who are specializing in cycling esports, it in a way to me legitimizes the sport, and it also raises the bar even further. So I'm looking forward to speaking to Kate and learning her insights into how she is making athletes perform even better in cycling esports.
Well, Kate, welcome to the Virtual Velo Podcast.
Thanks. Thank you for having me. I've been really excited and looking forward to this chat for a while now.
Oh, well, it is so good to have you here. And just as a notion, if anybody can hear a little whirring in the background, I understand there's a world champion just doing some training behind you.
Yep, it's raining here. So we've been indoors all week and he'll be finished soon. Maybe half an hour or stop.
Okay. Anyway, let's move on because it's you we really want to talk to. Your journey into cycling, Kate, began in other sports, really. We mentioned rowing, racket sports as well. Tell us a little bit about how you came into cycling and whether those earlier athletics experiences shaped your approach or maybe even success in cycling.
Yeah, so I didn't have the traditional introduction to cycling that a lot of people have. So my background's rowing. I started at university, but then before that, I just did every sport possible. So I did hockey, netball, rounders, athletics, you name it. If I could do something that was competitive and it got me out of school or it got me to a trip somewhere, I was doing it. And then when I went to university, I really started focusing on rowing, and the boat club was 10 kilometers from my house. So I had to walk 10K sometime a day just to go to training. And I was like, this isn't going to work. This is wasting 2.5 hours of my day. So I got a bike to commute on, and I had this hybrid bike. It didn't have proper drop down handlebars or anything. It was one of the ones where you sit up and pedal. But then we started doing recovery rides as well, and then commuting by bike. So I always enjoyed cycling, and it was always kind of way of commuting or recovery riding. And then I continued commuting to work by bike. And then when I moved to working in the corporate world, I was still commuting and I was still rowing. And there was a group of us that just really liked cycling, and we'd go riding after training. So we'd do 2 water sessions and maybe a run or a weight session, and then go and smash each other around Richmond Park and then have cake. And we just did it for fun, and like we shouldn't have been doing it. Like our rowing coaches were like, why are you doing this? You've just trained for 5 hours, like you don't need to go and train more. But it was just fun. So like I had planned, or I wanted to get as far as I could in rowing, but basically in like 2016 it was going to be my last season rowing, and then I was like, right, I'm going to try racing my bike, because I bought a better bike by then. And like one of my friends had said, oh, you're pretty good at beating people around the park, like why don't you go do a crit race? And I was literally going to do Women's Henley, try and get into Royal Henley, and then go and ride my bike, but I got internal bleeding, so I ended up watching Women's Henley from hospital, and then was like, right, one more season. So like I rode for another season, and then at the end of 2017, then I was like, right, let's go kind of race a bike. And I just started doing crit racing in London. And then from there, I just kind of kept doing different types of racing, road racing, and all the time it was like completely no fuel. It was like you just ride hard and then you're dead in the rest of the day. And it was not like it is now. But then yeah, in 22, I think I did Gravel Finland, and that was like my first time when I really thought this is the sort of racing which really, really suits me, because I've got like a diesel engine. So me trying to do road races and crits, I was just like in the middle of the pack and not getting anywhere. But gravel racing, it was like, okay, this is where you're doing well. And it was the most fun I had racing as well. So started gravel racing. Finland Gravel was my first ever gravel race. And then last year I decided to quit my job in finance and kind of go all in on cycling, and then also nutrition coaching as well, because just always liked helping people. I've always liked food and performance, and just trying to better yourself in your physical performance, basically.
Yeah, it's really interesting, Kate. You have a very diverse background in the pro cycling, as a gravel privateer, and now you're very immersed in virtual cycling esports. I'm curious to hear how that has evolved in your coaching, and what way you approach cycling esports now differently than you would from traditional cycling disciplines.
Yeah, it's interesting. So from a fueling perspective, if you boil it all down, it's all about how much carbs you need per hour to sustain effort. But then with traditional cycling, like the roads and like, I don't want to say gravel's traditional because it's still developing, but the races are longer. So you need to fuel for longer, and then you need different types of fuel because you're maybe having different things over multiple days. So you need to recover and stuff. But with the racing, it's more condensed racing, and it's more about being able to fuel that work that you're doing then and there. But then I think now, because there's even more e-races, you've then got the challenge of back-to-back race days, which is, I think, especially this month, because you've got Zwift Games and you've got SRC on MyWhoosh, people now have back-to-back race days, which is a bit more similar to the traditional cycling. So fueling, I think, is very similar. It boils down to just you need to have enough carbs to fuel the work. But I think with the e-racing, everyone needs a different amount because they're putting different watts out. And I think that's what people haven't really focused on. They just hear, oh, so-and-so is having 120 grams an hour, I'm going to do that. And then there's no further thought around that, whereas you need to look at kind of, okay, what's your whole day like? What's your energy output for the stuff you're doing off the bike? And then when's your training? What time of day is your race? And I think now the level that e-racing is getting to, you have to think about all of those things to make sure that your nutrition's really helping you perform to your best.
Oh, I think we are going to pick up and run with that very shortly, but I'm going to ask you just a couple more questions first before we really dive into that whole, both nutrition and fueling, and then the two different strategies around that. First of all, though, I do want to pick up, because you talked there about, condensed racing. We joked earlier on that there was a world champion training behind you. Do you think there are unique skills or attributes that separate successful esports athletes from those who perhaps excel in those more traditional road style cycling disciplines? Do you think it draws a different type of athlete, maybe from physiological perspectives or a mindset perspective?
Yes and no. Like, I think the main thing, if you really want to excel on esports, I liken it to rowing. So in rowing, you've got you're in a boat, and there's the saying that ergs don't float. So you can basically train on the indoor rowing machine. You could have the best score, but put you in a boat and maybe you don't move it and you're the worst person in the club. Esports is like the opposite of that. So like being on the turbo, you have to have that raw power, that mental strength to just push through the pain. Whereas on the road, maybe you don't have the best power of everyone in the peloton, but maybe you can read the race better. Maybe you can draft better. It's more, the tactics are different. So I think it attracts a certain type of personality in terms of you have to push yourself to the limit like every single race. Whereas you don't have to necessarily do that in a 4-hour gravel race. You just have to push yourself for the last 5 minutes. And the whole goal is like conserving as much energy as possible. Whereas e-racing, like I e-race and I watch it and like there's no conserving energy. It's like you're all in or you're out the back. But then physiologically wise, like the VO2 max and the repeatability of that the guys have that are doing really well, like is just insane. Like I look at some of the numbers people are putting out and I'm like, me and Jason joke that he puts out with one of his legs what I do with 2 of mine. And it's like, it's true. Like it sucks, but it's true.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I know that Emma is looking forward to really taking a deep dive into the nutrition. But I'm also curious, I know that you treat athletes holistically. And as you mentioned, the cycling esports is a whole different animal as far as the mental, the physical, the physiology. How do you train your athletes for that mental and the emotional demands of specific for cycling esports?
Well, good question. It really depends. Like, I think a lot of the guys that are doing well, they don't need so much help there. They've already just got it. And I think with them, the thing you have to help them with is taking a step back because they're so immersed in all the details. Taking a step back to see, right, which things are going to make you better tomorrow, but then which things are going to make you better like in a month's time. Whereas I think the people that aren't training at that elite level, you have to kind of look at why are they doing it and what do they want to get out of it, and then you have to kind of nurture them that way.
It does. So let's go back to fueling and nutrition, and I'm going to separate those two things out. So your nutrition consulting client list includes a number of the Zwift Games Championship races, including some impressive names. And I am going to caveat this with I did speak to this individual yesterday and they are very happy for us to use them as an example today. So our listeners don't think I've just pulled a random name from thin air and haven't actually asked. I have. So, for example, Hayden Pucker. And we have seen quite a lot of out on social media around from Hayden and from you about that working relationship. So it's been really interesting. Our listeners are not all elite level cycling esports racers like Hayden. And I wondered from a nutrition perspective whether maybe we could highlight some differences between the advice that you might give, for example, Hayden versus the advice that you might give to an esports rider and racer like me, for example. I'm a 60 kilogram, 52-year-old female. I ride about 8 to 10 hours a week and I race probably once a week, nowhere near the level of Sunday Race Club. I am, a really average Joe on a bike because I work weekends. So very, very different. What key things, if you had to pull 2 or 3 things that would be the key differentiators between the nutritional advice you might give Hayden versus me, what would they be?
Yeah, like it's very different, but then at the same time, the fundamentals are the same. It's like the amounts are different. So like with a lot of my clients that are like racing for fun and they're training like 8 to 10 hours a week, we really look at like how they're spending their energy throughout the day and then helping them cycle their carbs properly so they can, like, if they're doing a turbo at 6 p.m, they're eating for that, not just having their breakfast, their lunch at 12 and then not eating till after they've trained. Like, we look more on how it fits into their life. Whereas with someone like Hayden, and he's also very different to some of the other esports guys because he's also working full time and he's doing a physical job. And I think a lot of people don't realize that. And even he has to be treated differently. Whereas someone that's just training full time, it's not about working the nutrition around their life. It's optimizing their life to perform. And I think that's the key difference is with people that are doing it for fun, you want to make the food work for them as best they can, but also you have to look at the social side of the food. Like they are eating with other people. With an elite level athlete that their job is to perform their best, you have to look at it from the other end to optimize everything for the performance. So I say that's the main thing. And then the other thing that people that aren't elite racers, they think they can eat more than they can. That's the biggest thing I find. And it's kind of helping people understand, like, they don't actually need as much food as they think. And like, just because you've gone and done like a 3-hour ride on the weekend doesn't mean you need to then eat extra for the next few days. But then when you train someone like Hayden, you're like, right, what have you done today, physical wise? What training have you got? And then what's happening the next 3 days? And then we have to kind of eat in advance of that and to recover from it as well.
I was going to ask you next, what was the difference between those elite cyclists who have full-time jobs and those that don't? Because it is a very different beast, isn't it?
Yeah, like massively. And like, this is what I've had to personally learn as well, because like up until last year I was working full-time and training full-time, and it's completely different to training full-time and having your training on focus, just like focusing on that. And I think you've got a lot more time and energy to do better things with your food. Like you've got more time to cook nutritious meals. But with those people that are juggling it, we then have to look at, okay, what's the most efficient thing we can do with the time and resources we have available? And it's not just like resources, like it's things like trying to fit in going food shopping, or like having enough energy to then cook dinner. So do a lot of things like, what can you do batch cooking, and what can you have as your emergency meal if nothing has gone to plan for the day? So there's more planning involved initially for those that are kind of juggling multiple things. And then I think it's a lot easier those that are just focusing on the training, that they've got more time to plan the food, make decisions day to day. Whereas with the guys that are working full time, it helps them make the decisions so then they don't have to be making them day to day.
Let's move on to fueling strategies then. So how would on-the-bike fueling advice differ, perhaps between training sessions and race day sessions?
Yeah, so it depends on the intensity, the duration, and then what time of day you're training or when the race is. Because a lot of people, they'll go, oh, I've got a training session in the evening, and they don't even really think about food as part of that. They just think, right, breakfast, lunch, dinner, training is going to be at 5, so I'll have dinner after. So then that's like, they just don't think about the whole thing. And then race days are more stressful, they're more intense, so you have to be thinking ahead of, okay, I need to be fueled to go into that race. Whereas training, you can get away with fueling as you start. So if, for example, I've got a client that's training in the afternoon or evening and they've had their last meal at like 12, it's like, okay, have a bowl of cereal before the start, or start fueling as soon as you get on there. But when you've got a race, you want to be ready to go and fueled up as soon as you start. So the difference is like working back from the race time, and you go, right, my race is at 12, my last meal is going to be 2 to 3 hours before, and it needs to be carbohydrate focused. So you're changing the type of food you have, the timing, and then the amount. But it all depends on the intensity of the race, how long it is. But in general, the principles are the same for kind of training and racing. It's just looking how much you need and the timing which changes, and then the type of food that changes.
So we talked earlier on about the Zwift Sprint Championships being back-to-back with the Sunday Race Club. If you're focusing on a sprint race versus perhaps focusing on something longer like Sunday Race Club, does that shift how you approach your fueling? Or again, is it about what you consume during those races?
Yeah, no, it doesn't really change, because again, like the main difference with those is the duration of the races. So with the Zwift races this last weekend, they had like 2 or 3 stages, but they had rests in between. So we always look at it from what you need per hour, and then we cut that down. The main challenge we found last weekend was making sure you were recovered enough for the Sunday, and also food that you're having on the Saturday isn't going to make you super heavy for the Sunday, because then you've got the second weigh in. So generally the food doesn't change. Like, for example, with Hayden, we do 120 to 150 grams of carbs per hour for the race. So that was the plan for Saturday, and then also the plan for Sunday. Just on Saturday, he had less because the race didn't last as long. So it doesn't really change. It's all just look at intensity, look at the duration, and then adjust from there.
I do have to ask though, I do know the riders in the USA, Canada and other parts of the world, depending upon the 24-hour clock on a Sunday, race at some ridiculous times. You just talked about racing at 12 o'clock lunchtime or 4 o'clock in the afternoon or 6 o'clock in the evening. I see social media posts for Sunday Race Club with them starting at 2 a.m. in the morning, 3, 4, 5 a.m. I'm assuming it's the nutrition and fueling strategy stays the same. It's just the hours in terms of time. How does that play? Because that's a real specific thing. I mean, you would never expect a road race. I mean, okay, you get 24-hour races, and long-distance endurance stuff, but you don't really think about a 1-hour race starting at 3 a.m. in the morning in any other form of cycling.
No, and I don't know how they do it. Like, no money could get me out of bed to race at like 2 o'clock in the morning. Like, it's bad enough when I have to race. I think before the times changed this month, I had to get up at like 8 o'clock and I'd be on the bike at 8:30 for the 8:50 start. So I don't know how the guys in like New Zealand and the US can kind of do it. Like, massive kudos to them. But yeah, the fueling doesn't change. So when you've got an intense race like the Sunday Race Club, like beforehand you want to eat foods that are quick to absorb. And it also depends, are you willing to get up 3 hours before the start to eat something that takes time to digest? Or do you want to get up an hour and a half before the start and have something like liquid or gel based, and then you're going to absorb it quicker? So the food doesn't change. It's just kind of the mental strength aspect that's needed to get up at those silly.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? We talked about mindset right at the top of the show as well. And it is a very specific mindset. I'm not sure. Yeah, I don't know about my alarm. I sometimes think sound checks at 6 a.m. are early enough. But we talked a lot about elite racers. If you had to give one key piece of advice to our listeners who were racing cycling esports but not at elite level, what would it be in terms of fueling on the bike?
Eat carbs that you like eating and have something carb-based beforehand and then eat on the bike. I think a lot of people don't eat the right things. So when you're racing, eat things like sweets. When you're racing, that's the time to eat Haribo. And that's the time to eat all the sugary stuff that everyone else says don't eat. It ruins your teeth. It's like bad for you. It'll make you fat. Racing is the perfect time to eat this sort of stuff. And I think most people, when I first work with them, they just aren't fueling the races. They're just drinking water. And I think you can get a lot of benefits if you are fueling the work you're actually doing. So yeah, basically just eat carbs and eat carbs you like.
I'm going to ask you a little interim question here. What's your favourite type of carb?
Good question. I don't actually know. I've eaten so many recently that I'm like done with carbs. At the moment, we've got a thing for Frutissimo Haribo. But it's only because they're actually quite chewy rather than they're not hard, but they also have, I think, 90 grams of carbs per 100. So it's the highest amount of carbs per 100 grams for Haribo.
Everyone will be out hunting now for them. But I do have to agree with you. Some soft gel sweets are not soft enough when you're racing.
Yeah.
When you're actually working really hard, it's actually quite tricky to find a sweet that actually you can consume whilst your heart rate is really high.
Yeah, and that's when gels and liquids come in.
Talking about carbohydrate, I'm going to ask you your views on two things. Because if you go onto social media and you follow sort of nutrition sites and those types of things, particularly around sport, there's two things that there's always a lot of chatter and discussion and influencers talking about. One of them is high levels of protein for recovery, and the other is increased carbohydrate intake during racing. What are your thoughts on those two sort of social media trends that, really just, if you're looking at that type of stuff on Instagram or wherever, that's really what you're seeing a lot of?
Yeah, like, it's interesting. A lot of the stuff that's posted online is like posted without any context, and it's posted to like grab attention and get people into their platform or buy whatever this person's trying to sell. And like, I know to an extent I'm similar because I'm marketing my nutrition coaching. I want to help people. And I think the key thing is like people generally don't know what enough protein is, so they don't know what a high protein diet is. And I think the best thing people can do is understand what their energy requirements are. So like just even going on a simple metabolic calculator to work out what you need just to kind of function on a day-to-day basis, and then understand what that means in like food wise. So with most of my athletes, we do 2 grams of protein per kilo of body weight. And like some people would say that's maybe not high enough, or maybe it's too low, but that seems to be what works for people to feel good and to not get really sore and to not get sick. But some people are telling people to eat like 4+ grams of protein, and like your body's got a certain amount of protein it can absorb in a day. And I think the main thing, understand what you need for your size, your weight, your height, your gender, and then go from there. Like, don't just go from the face value information that you're getting online. And then with the carbs, you don't need to fuel everything. Like if you're racing e-races, then you probably will benefit from having more carbohydrates. But most people that are training like an hour a day don't need to fuel their session. They just need to eat something before and then make sure they're eating afterwards. And I think when you really understand what's in the food you're eating, it gets a lot easier to do that and make those decisions and not take everything face value that you're seeing online.
Yeah, this is really, really interesting, Kate, the theory behind what you're doing. And I know that a lot of people that are listening are going to say, well, how can this help me? You know, what is in the practical example? So maybe you can like break down for a competitive cycling esports athlete, somebody who's come from the road and they have those traditional mindsets of, I need this many carbohydrates, this much protein, these macros. And how does that then evolve into the short duration, high intense cycling esports races? And then as the level gets higher, they become even more intense. How would you advise somebody who doesn't really have a direction with their nutrition and they want to take it to the next level?
Yeah, like there's no straight answer. Like everyone is like completely different. Everyone's got different circumstances, they've got different preferences. So I don't have like a set template that say this is what you need to do, go off and do it, or work for you. How I approach it with people is we look at what they're doing now. And when I say what they're doing now, we look at what they're eating, their behaviors around food, like their thoughts towards food, and whether it's like it means something socially for them or whether it doesn't, and those things like that. Then we look at the things that they're doing already that are helping them get to their goals, so that are actually having a positive impact on them training or on them performing. And then we do more of that. And then the things that aren't helping and aren't pushing them in a positive direction before their goals, we look at, okay, is that something we need to completely change? Or is there another behavior we need to learn instead? And then we kind of approach it like that. And in general, most people need to change how much protein they're eating. Most people don't eat enough. Most people eat way too much fat. And because of that split, they're eating too many calories over the whole day, and their weight is like either going up or it's not going down as they want it to. And they're just constantly hungry. And it's because they don't have their macronutrients in the right kind of balance. And then once you then help them understand that, you can then walk them through, right, here's your day, here's where you're training, here's where you're not doing anything. Now you help them cycle their carbs around what they're doing to then help them with their athletic goals. But like, there's no like set piece of advice that you can give everyone and say, this is going to be the thing that does it for you, because you might have someone that's like, as part of their daily job, they have to eat out with clients all the time. I can't just say, stop eating out with clients, because that's got a massive impact on their job and their income and things maybe. So there's no like one size fits all. You really have to look at the individual, what their behaviors are, what they're doing, and then how we can then get them towards their goals in a better way.
Right. So what I'm hearing is that you have a detailed analysis for every athlete, get to know them, and then create an individualized plan. And there's no one size fits all, basically.
Yeah, no, and like the thing that I find really interesting about coaching is like for all my athletes and clients, they end up becoming friends, because you have to know them to that level in order to understand why they think the way they do about food. So you can then help them change their beliefs, because at the end of the day, people's food and their habits based on their internal belief system. And to understand what someone's internal belief system is, you really have to understand them as a person and understand what's driving them. And so it doesn't just become about food, it's about the whole person and then also the people around them.
Well, I can certainly understand how that mindset is something that you have to work with holistically with athletes. And that comes up quite often within our community when it pertains to the weigh-in procedure and the weigh-in policy. And you did mention that earlier. How much do you focus on that with your recommendations for the elite athletes? Do you consider that a necessary element of the sport that you have to prepare for? Do you have different views on the way that the weigh-in policy should be implemented?
Yeah, like it's a really interesting one. I focus on that with my athletes because some of them ask me for that help. And there's a lot of things you can do with food, with water retention and things that can essentially change your weight. Like, it's a tricky one. There's no right or wrong answer with the weigh-in stuff. Like, if you've got any sport where there's a weight class or power to weight is important, everyone is going to do everything possible to optimize their body weight to get the best performance. The challenge is, how can you make sure, like, as a sport, that the athletes are kind of not putting themselves at any risk health-wise? So for me, that's something that it's like, who's responsible for that? Is it the athlete that's responsible, or is it the federation that's governing the sport? And then esports is new, so like, who's really responsible for this? So it's a tricky one. Like, you never know what's the right thing to do. But for me as a coach, I want to help my athlete compete at their best. So if that means helping them understand how they can be as light as possible on race day, I will help them do that. But then the other thing that's interesting, at the other end of the spectrum, you have people not trying to weight cut and actually trying to be as heavy as possible because they're super light. And the games don't favor people that are really light on the flats. So there's the other side of it that's not being talked about so much, is people trying to be as heavy as possible on weigh day so they can basically a better chance of not being dropped on the flats and things. What is the best way for it to be fair? Like, I don't think there's ever going to be the most fair way to do it. Like, unless you have some capability for your turbo to weigh you whilst you're racing, like, that's the only way that you're going to really race at your actual weight. And then, like, you can get off the turbo a kilo lighter if you drink a litre of water and don't sweat. Like, and everyone's different. I think you're never going to get a weigh-in policy that everyone's going to be happy with.
Yeah, a nutrition consultant, a nutrition professional, do you think that kind of yo-yo dieting, going weight cutting and then rehydrating, is healthy for an athlete? Is that something that the federations, the platforms should address and maybe do a better job of?
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I don't know whose responsibility it is. Like, for me, I take ownership of myself. So if I'm going to weight cut for the monthly weigh-in, like, I will do it, and I will do it to a point where I know it's not going to affect my performance. And you're only talking about water weight cut. These guys aren't crash dieting every week, because that wouldn't be possible and it wouldn't be healthy. But like, cutting kind of a kilo or two from water isn't going to have a massive impact on your health in the long run. And then I think it's up to the athletes to research it themselves and understand how their body works and understand where's the line for them. So I think it's more the athletes should take responsibility. But then with the timing of the weigh-ins, the closer they are to the race, the less time you have to rehydrate and stuff. So you're less likely to do a bigger weight cut than if it's like the day before. Like, if you look at boxers, I don't know how many days earlier the weight cut is, but they sometimes weigh in like 5 to 10 kilos lighter than they actually fight at. And it's like, is it really that weight class fight if they're fighting a different weight? Whereas with e-racing, it's like 90 minutes. So you're not going to change your weight that much.
You know, it's a tough question, and we ask that question on this podcast quite often because it is so nuanced. And we also ask the question of the incredible performances that we've been seeing lately with athletes putting up better than World Tour power. And, you know, the weight gap is one of the things when you see watts per kilogram that are greater than the World Tour pros are doing. But I wonder, from your perspective, whether having a focused cycling esports nutrition plan is also driving that and driving performance, raising the bar. And can we look forward to having that produce even better power numbers, that the athletes are better fueled and you, as a professional, are learning, you know, your technique better and you're able to advise them better? Is that just another one of the elements that's making cycling esports so incredibly competitive?
Yeah, I think maybe, but I think it's more down to the training and the focus. Like, I think the nutrition based on esports and what I see on the road and in gravel, it's pretty much similar. Like, people are ingesting the same amount of carbohydrates and we've got a limit to how much we can absorb. So I think there's like a ceiling to that. I think the real key things that are driving the performances are the guys are all driving each other. Like they're all getting better and beating each other. And I think when you have a group of really talented people that are then pushing themselves more, that's driving the performance. But then the other thing that you have to think about is the road and esports are very, very different. The World Tour guys, think of how many race days they're having. And like, I know there's a lot of e-races, but they're an hour long. Some of these guys are doing like 2 grand tours. So the load on the body is completely different. The recovery time is completely different. Whereas on the racing side, I liken it a lot to more similar to rowing, because you had set races in the calendar. So you knew when you needed to peak for. Whereas on the road, you'd never know where you need to peak for, because you don't know where you're going to be sent by a team, or you don't know where you can afford to go and race. Whereas with the esports, you know, I'm racing every Sunday. That's one of my hard sessions a week. And I can make sure I'm recovered and just primed for that. And it's also the training that you need to do for that. It's very specific. So you can be more fresh and hold your like form consistently, if that makes sense.
No, it certainly makes sense. You know, it's an interesting topic, and I hope it's one that we see evolving. And I know that you're on the cutting edge of that. I want to just change gears a little bit and ask you a question that came up when I was actually discussing the sprint championship with Neil Fryette, who ended up winning. He tells me that as he's getting older, he's spending a lot more time in the gym, because as he's transitioning from traditional cycling, he's able to find more explosive power from his gym workouts, from his plyometric workouts. And as he's emphasizing cycling esports, he finds that that workout in the gym, that time that he spends in the gym, is actually more valuable than the training that he does indoors on the turbo in some respect. The way that he framed it for me is that this is counteracting the VO2 loss from me getting older. But I'm curious to get your opinion on that. Do you recommend weight training for your clients? And what
Yes.
elements do you focus on? Is it plyometrics? Is it more just, straight bulk movements like squats, those type of things?
Yeah, weight training, like everyone should do it regardless of whether you're a cyclist or not. Like there's loads of research out there that says it helps women through menopause, because so many things change in your body that weight training can actually your muscles still recruit enough muscle fibers, and can actually not like counteract the hormonal changes, but basically replicate the things that you're missing from the hormonal changes, and can stop muscle degeneration. And it's the same for as you get older. Like the thing that you start losing is like the fast twitch. So if you can do weights and do explosive weights, like it's going to definitely improve your cycling performance. And like as a diesel engine with like one fast twitch muscle fiber per leg, the explosive weight training is what's really helped me. And especially last year, I was more consistent with it because I wasn't traveling as much. I think I had the best power coming back from off season because I'd done weights throughout the whole season and I hadn't lost so much VO2. But as well, because cycling's a non-weight bearing sport, it's also really important for your bone health. So like you need to put your body under stress and heavy weights and do them explosively to basically stay strong, keep your bones strong, and then it will definitely help with your VO2 efforts. And recruiting your muscle fibers when you're sprinting is also a really good thing. So explosive stuff, and a lot of people are like, yeah, I do explosive stuff. And then I get them to send me a video, and then they're just like going down for 3, up for 3. It's like, that's not explosive. We need to be like really powerful. Like I think the one I saw a video, I think it was Lotta Kopecky, and she was doing explosive weights. And so now whenever I see any of my clients that are not doing explosive weights, I send them that video, and then you can see what explosive weights look like.
There's another one everyone's searching for. It's really interesting, isn't it? And Chris and I were actually just talking before we even came on air earlier on about weights and weight training, and Chris was telling about his weight training past, and I was owning up to the fact that it's only since I hit 50 that I started lifting weights. But boy, does it make a difference.
Yeah, it does. Like I've even got my mum lifting weights, because if you don't use it, you lose it. So if you're not doing anything, and if you're not doing sports to the same level, you're just going to lose the muscle mass. And as you get older, the more muscle mass you can retain, higher your metabolic rate will be, and basically the more cake you can eat. That's how I see it.
as a physical therapist, obviously, I'm a huge proponent of exercise for therapy. But I think that as a community, and maybe more so with the earlier generation, everybody shied away from weight training. We didn't want to bulk up. We thought that if we lifted weights, we were going to automatically gain, 10 kilos, and then we wouldn't be able to climb anymore. But the studies show that it's the exact opposite. We increase our power to weight ratio so much that it just makes total sense. And just anecdotally for me, I know that when I am working out heavy in the gym, I have my best result racing virtually indoors because of the structure, the format of the races. It's all short, intense duration power, and it really translates really well. So I wonder if maybe that's another thing that will improve over time, and then cycling esports racers will refine their weight training and improve their performance even better. But it's an interesting topic.
It is. Now, one of the things you were talking about earlier on, Kate, was the racing season, and not necessarily being, 2 big 3-week grand tours on the plan, but actually every weekend. It's a really interesting one, isn't it? That the opportunity to race and ride is there all year round. That every weekend is for 12 months of the year. There's no off season. Particularly, I'm thinking about the more elite end of the cycling esports racer, because that opportunity to ride and race all year round can be a bit of a challenge, I imagine, in terms of balancing, particularly if you are a full-time esports athlete, balancing that financial incentive to earn your living with the maintaining continuous peak form versus the potential for burnout that may well be there as well, because you're not having that off-season, or maybe not as an explicit an off-season. Are there anything sort of advice you give to your clients around that sustainable performance, or any specific wellness practices you would advocate in that instance?
Yeah, it's a tough one. And then you also, with these sorts of people, they want to go and race. It's like with Hayden, we have the discussions like, what are you doing to rest this week? Like, this is one of our main discussions. Like, we need him to rest. And it's like, I think there's a temptation to just race all the time because you can. And obviously people are earning a living from it, so that they want to race. But you have to kind of frame it in a slightly different way. Like, if you had a normal quote normal job, you would have a holiday, and during this holiday you would rest, and maybe you don't get paid, but you have to do what you need to do to keep you well physically and mentally. And so tend to make sure people are in the mindset that they're like excited to race and ready to go. Whereas if they're like, oh, I've got another race this weekend, that they're in that point where maybe they need a rest. And we'll then look at what was the last thing they did to rest? When did they last have a rest? And we'll then see how we can like build that in. But yeah, the main thing is you just have to be really honest with yourself. And the main question I get people to ask themselves is, are you having fun and are you enjoying it? If the answer is yes, go for it, keep going. If the answer is no, then it's like, okay, maybe this is a sign to have a rest.
Yeah, I think that the way that cycling esports is structured now, it's a very fragile ecosystem there as far as the financial incentives go. The racers aren't being paid to race. They're being paid for their performance in the races. So they're not at peak form, they're not going to get paid, right? And that's kind of like almost like a dangerous spiral, because then they have to double up in the next race, and then they're just digging a hole for themselves. I guess it's one of those things that we see the racers, and some of them are full-time and they're making money, but there's a lot of risk that's involved in it. And if it's not managed correctly, like you say, then it could potentially lead the athletes down a very dangerous path of overtraining and other issues that we know can take a long time to successfully get out of.
Yeah, definitely. And I think as an athlete, if you're going to try and perform and be a professional, I think part of being a professional athlete is understanding that that's something you also have to manage. Like, it's not just about training, like recovery is part of the whole package that you need to have. So I think it's hard, but it's also important. I think the quicker you learn to rest, the better, or the more consistent you can be with your performance. It's like, I remember me at like 22, 23 when I was rowing, working in the city, wanted to have a social life, wanted to compete at a high level. And it's like, you can't do all of those things. You have to choose what thing you can do, and then make sure that you're not doing too many things and burning the candle at all ends.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I want to, you mentioned the complete picture, and I want you to kind of step out of your coaching box a little bit here. I see the way that you represent yourself on social media. You have an admirable number of followers. I wish I had that many, but you do a really good job of promoting yourself. And the way that I look at the complete picture for cycling esports athletes is that they don't have a team. They don't have that structure. So they have to be expert self-promoters in order to get sponsorships and to raise their own profile. Do you think about that with your athletes, and perhaps utilizing your own experience? What kind of advice would you give to athletes in that way?
Oh, interesting question. Yeah, it's a tricky one. Like, unless you've got a team, you have to go and do all of that. I don't really give advice to my athletes on that, because I think I've kind of done this by accident. Like, for example, my Instagram, I had a reel that went viral over a year ago now, and it was just something that was relatable. It was there was one of me, and I was like, had my head down on my bike, and I was going through a really stressful time. I was doing too many things, and I just felt like nothing was working, and like there was no point training. And the whole premise was like, this is me trying to do everything and it's not working, and I'm just sat on my turbo. And that was, I think, the thing that kind of made me realize that you're inspiring other people and you're trying to help other people, but everyone's just looking for like relatability and community. And I found it really fun. So I just started making fun of all the like problems I had as like an athlete, trying to have a full-time job and trying to do everything, and it like not really working out. Everything kind of happened by accident from them. But like, in terms of cycling, and like nowadays, you can't just be an athlete. You have to be your marketing tools. You have to be the person that's like cheering for yourself, because everyone else is just trying to do the same thing that you're going to do. And it depends on who's kind of being the best ambassador for the sport as well as the race results. It's not just the race results anymore. But yeah, I think in terms of advice to other people, do the stuff that you enjoy doing. I find it really fun to make reels, and I've started making Jason make fun reels as well. And it's a way to have fun doing a sport and just make it a bit less serious, because you can be really focused and really serious all the time, which is great in one respect, but then at the same time, you also need to have fun. And the Instagram stuff I find really fun.
There's a very well-used phrase that a happy athlete is a fast athlete.
Exactly.
That's true. And the whole social media side of things is like a Rubik's Cube. It's so difficult to figure out what's going to relate and what's not going to relate. But I think it's really important for the athletes, because they need to promote themselves. And if they're going to have sponsorships, if they're going to create a stable financial environment for themselves, they're going to have to do that. I almost feel as if the racing is only, half of what they really need to do. They need to get the results, but they also need to put themselves out there and say, this is the value that I can bring to you as a sponsor. It's a very interesting question. It really is.
Yeah, and then maybe one thing to add, like, I think the thing we forget when you are an athlete and you're truly doing it just because you love the sport and you love pushing yourself, you forget that actually you're in the entertainment business. Like, you doing your sport is entertaining other people when you're racing. And I think it's so easy to forget that when you're this side of it, because you're like, right, I'm doing 20 plus hours a week training to entertain people for an hour a week on the weekend. And you're like, I've put all of this effort in, I deserve more from it. But then at the same time, it's like, well, you're also an advertising tool and you're a marketing tool. And I think it's easy to forget that side of it. But I think the people that really understand that side of it are the people that do really, really well, regardless of their race results necessarily. And I think the best athletes have the complete package, and they're able to do the business side, or they've got people supporting them with it as well.
Yeah, that is, isn't it? Sport is a business, and as an athlete, you are a business person, and it's not really what you think about when you get into an athletic career at all, is it? Because you're in it because your sport is your passion.
So
exactly. Yeah. Talking about passion, and I was going to ask our listeners, we've talked through lots of stuff today on the program. If you had to pull one piece of advice out, whether it be training, nutrition, promotion, around the balancing your life, what one piece of advice would you leave an aspiring elite cycling esports athlete with?
Ooh, so many things. Make sure you're doing it because you enjoy it. I think that's the key thing. If you're enjoying it and having fun, you'll achieve everything you want, but you need to make sure you're genuinely just doing it for you and doing it because you enjoy it.
That's great advice. I think that we often lose sight of that. I always said with my practice that I wanted to find a job that didn't seem like work, because then I would never work a day in my life. And I always felt that way. So we really appreciate it, Kate. The conversation has been extremely enlightening. Tell us how people can get in touch with you if they want to perhaps utilize your services and get an actual nutrition plan like I should be doing.
Oh, we can sort you out. I think Instagram's the easiest. Kate Mac_44 is the best way to get hold of me.
Kate, it's been an absolute pleasure having you here today on the Virtual Velo Podcast. Thank you ever so much for joining us. So you can subscribe to the Virtual Velo Podcast on your favourite podcast provider. And of course, on YouTube, you can follow me, Emma Martin, on Instagram at biking_Emma. You can follow Chris at the Zwift. You can catch up with me putting words to the action on the Sunday Race Club on MyWhoosh this Sunday and every Sunday coming. You can head over to thezimmunique.com and become a member as well of the Escape Collective to join the conversation and support independent cycling esports journalism. We'll have more interesting guests from the world of cycling esports joining us, including UAE Team Emirates Michael Vink, re-proposed as an esports star, coming back to his roots. Ruvi CEO Peter Samek is joining us. Swedish Cycling's esport director Connie Bjornhall is going to be here as well, as long as several other impactful people waiting in the wings. Thank you for your patience hanging fire for the Virtual Velo Podcast. Thank you, Kate. It's been absolutely brilliant, Kate, listening to you share your advice and perspective on all things nutrition, fueling and cycling esports. Thank you to our listeners for listening. Please take care of your heart. Chris will tell you, get a coronary calcium scan. I'm going to tell you, stay safe, enjoy your riding. We'll see you again soon. Goodbye.